Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Happy February. It's release day for our February Stitchy and Quilty Pillow of the Month. If you're new to my channel and you're not sure what the pillow of the month is, 2 years ago I did trucks of the month, and then last year we did houses of the month. This year we are doing pillows of the month. And so each month I'm putting out a pillow pattern. The Quilty version is a 20 by 20 inch pillow, and then the Stitchy version is a 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch little cross stitch pillow. You can use them for pin cushions or just to decorate your sewing space. You could also frame it. You don't have to put it in a pillow like we are. And the Stitchy pattern also comes with a whole cloth option in case you don't want to make individual little pillows. You could also add little hangers to them and make them into ornaments so you have a fun kind of seasonal ornament to add to your tree this year. The videos and patterns are releasing on the 1st of every month, so you can see a video release here on YouTube. You can also head over to my store and get the patterns there by the 1st of the month. And if you haven't already, make sure to join our Facebook group because I post a little bit early in that group, so you get not only a sneak peek, but you can get a hold of these patterns just a tad early. That link will be below as well. So let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to take a look at the Quilty Pillow first. So here is what our Quilty Pillow looks like, and I don't have the pillow in it yet because sometimes I think it's a little bit easier for you to see the pattern without the pillow in it. But here's our pillow. We did these cute little two-tone hearts, and I'll do a close-up for you right here. I also did a variety of backgrounds. So I tried to make mine super scrappy, so no two hearts are the same, and no two backgrounds for my hearts are the same either. So I just mixed and matched and had a lot of fun. The pattern calls for a solid background and then just a pink and a red so that you can make the whole quilt that way if you wanted to use solids or a print, pink and red. But I thought I would make it scrappy, and so I wanted to just share with you how I did that here on YouTube. So I am going to show you a little video tutorial on how I made the hearts. I'm also going to talk a little bit about how I made them scrappy from the measurements in my quilt pattern. But just a quick overview, if ever I get a pattern and it says I need, like, say 9 heart blocks like in this one, I'll take that pattern and however many pieces I need to cut, I'll just divide them up and cut a bunch of scrappy pieces, all the same size obviously as indicated in the pattern, but just instead of 9 of one color, I'll cut 9 of a variety of different prints, and then the result is a really fun scrappy pillow. And as you can see here, I just picked 2 and put them together. I didn't do a whole lot of planning. The only planning I did on this was for my pinks. I didn't have enough to do 9 different pinks, and so I have 2 pinks here. This light pink stripe, which I apologize, it's blowing out a little bit on my camera, but that light pink stripe is repeated in a couple places, and that pink text print is repeated. So all I did when I put this together was just make sure that they weren't together or next to each other when I sewed my hearts together, and everything was good. So that's just a little quick tip on making it scrappy. Let's jump into today's video tutorial and I'll show you how to make these cute little hearts. So I thought I would share some tips on how to make this scrappy. So if you would like to do that, I dug into my scrap bins and just picked out a variety of different reds. You could also just do 1 pink and 1 red for this, but I thought scrappy would be really cute. So I've got a bunch of different pinks. I did have to double up on a couple of my pinks, so I actually laid them all out so they weren't next to each other. So I've got these 2 and then I've got these 2, and that way I can make sure they aren't next to each other. I also cut out 9 different reds, and those are all just sitting here on the side. Some other tools, obviously, that are helpful are going to be your rotary trimmer, and the 3.5 inch by 6.5 inch ruler is also perfect for this project, so that's what I used. Now to make my background scrappy, I went ahead and cut out all of the background pieces that I need for each heart, but for each one I just cut it out of a different fabric. You could also do the same background fabric as well, but again I laid them out so they're spread out. I've got like a little cross here and a cross here and a cross here, so I just wanted to make sure they weren't too close together. I also have a dot, and a dot. So I like to lay my fabric out like this when I'm doing scrappy. That way I can make sure I don't have 2 things that end up right next to each other. If it does, then oh well, it's not the end of the world. But this is how I work it out when I'm cutting scrappy. Now I will show you how to make one of these little hearts. So we're gonna get these guys out of the way and we'll make this one right here. So I go ahead and keep them all in order as I'm sewing, and I'll just sew one and then put it back, sew another one, put it back. That way they stay in order. But we're gonna take our large squares and our little squares, and we're gonna draw a line on the wrong side of them using a friction erasable pen. This is gonna be in the seam line, so it doesn't really matter. And we just do that. Now I'm going to be using my seam tape on my machine, so I'm not going to draw it on all of these, but I just wanted to show you what that'll look like. Next, we're going to take this and put it on the bottom of our heart, and we're just going to sew along that diagonal line. And for these, because we're going to be flipping this back out, I'll actually sew just a hair to the outside edge of my line just to account. It gives me a little bit of space for that fabric fold there. And then you're going to do the same thing with your small pieces as well. Again, I'm not going to draw my line because I'm going to be using the tape on my sewing machine. And so the first thing that I do is I literally take all of these rectangles and I'm going to sew the tops on just like this, and we're going to sew along the diagonal to create that top edge. And I like to do all of those first because it doesn't matter which way it goes. Once you start putting on these bottom pieces, you're going to have one that goes to the left of your heart and one that goes to the right of your heart. That'll be your left heart piece and your right heart piece, and so you cannot sew these the same way and flip it over or anything like that. You have to sew left pieces and right pieces going in the opposite directions. As you can see, I'm using my diagonal seam tape right here on my machine to put that corner on so that you don't have to draw lines on all of your pieces. So it's really nice and handy. And then we can just keep that corner on that line as we're stitching. So here we are, I've sewn all of my diagonals, and now before I trim this, I actually find it easier to press. I've already pressed these two back, but before I trim off the extra on these, I just go ahead and fold back and just make sure I'm using my previous fabric to make sure that this snowball is going to be lining up with that, which is going to make my block more accurate. And then I can just give it a press, and then I know that this block is accurate before I cut off the rest of this fabric underneath. And if I need to, at that point, I could adjust this seam or, you know, anything I need to do to make sure that this is more accurate. Whenever you're snowballing corners like this, the seams can just get a little bit wonky. So that's my little tip for you today. The other thing that I always do on snowballed blocks is I will take my ruler. These are really nice and straight because I lined it up with those previous seams, but I will go ahead and take my ruler and just trim up that block before I proceed, because as you can see, I'm cutting off just a teeny tiny bit there, just the littlest bit, but that way this block is going to be nice and accurate for when I'm sewing them together. These seams can just really get wonky. So now I can take my ruler and trim away my excess fabric 1/4 inch away from my stitch line. And these are actually big enough, if you're thinking ahead of, you can run another stitch right here and have some little leftover half square triangles, which is kind of cute. Maybe I'll make something with those as well. So there's our left side. I went ahead and sewed my right side, and I made sure to sew it the opposite direction of this one. And I'm going to do the same thing where I press back my fabric, use these previous fabric lines to line that up. I'm going to press this one back. Now here's a good example of something that I can fix before I cut it off. Look at how off I got on that seam. Now it's inside of 1/4 inch, so I could probably make this work if I didn't notice it and had cut them off first. But what happened was I just sewed, either this square isn't exactly square, or I just sewed a little bit too far to the right instead of getting right up on this corner. So I probably needed to come out here a little bit more. So I can just seam rip that and fix it before I cut off my fabric, and that way I can make sure that I have an accurate block. So no harm done. I still have my square piece. I am going to check this with my ruler to make sure this is indeed a square. It's looking a little bit long to me, so I might have just cut that piece a little bit off. And if you're curious, this is Cindy's Seam Ripper. It's by Riley Blake Designs, and it's really nice. You just stick it in your finger and super easy to use. Okay, let's fix this square. Oh, yep, look at that. I didn't cut this one square, which in turn caused me some issues when I was sewing, and it happens. I usually cut a few layers at a time. I probably cut all 4 of these at once, and maybe I just got a little bit wonky. Okay, then we can just push this one back, and nice and square. Perfect. One thing to note when I press these is I pressed out towards my white. So on these, I actually recommend pressing the red one toward the red and the pink one towards the white. That way your seams will nest. And this is my new iron, by the way, from Laura Starr. I love it so much. It's like these seams are so flat, it's not even funny. Now I'm going to take my ruler and just make sure everything is nice and accurate. It looks pretty good because, again, we pressed out our snowball pieces before trimming. And then now I can come back and cut these off. And you do just need to remember to flip them out because we pressed towards the red. And this one, I actually already ran a stitch line a 1/2 inch away from my center stitch line, so I have a pre-made little half square triangle that I can use for something else. Okay, so here's our 2 heart halves, and now if we flip them over, we'll see that those seams will nest perfectly. The other thing you could do is you could press these open as well, but I like pressing to one side. That way when we put these right side together, these seams will nest. So now all we need to do is sew these 2 heart halves together, and I'm just gonna line up that nested seam. I'm gonna throw a pin right there just to keep that seam together, and then I'll do the same thing with these down here. Again, I just take those and just make sure they're nested together. I'm going to place a pin right there to hold those and to hold those. And then now I can take this to the machine and just sew right down this edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and hopefully these seams will line up perfectly. And let's see how we did. There we go. So they're pretty darn close. Let's press this out and see what it looks like. Now to press this, I'm just going to press to one side first, and then if you'd pressed open, then you can press open afterward. The other thing I like to do for these blocks is just put on my quilter's clapper for just a little bit until it cools. Now one thing I will say while this is cooling is that with my Laura Star steam iron, I haven't really had to use this that much because the seams are so flat just from the steam. So, you know. It's kind of nice actually. So anyways, look at this perfect heart. Let's zoom in on that so you can see these points. Isn't that nice? The last thing we need to do is just take our square ruler and just square this up to make sure it's the perfect size. Those measurements are all in your pattern as well. But I do like to square up my blocks and my pieces as I'm going for more accurate finished blocks and then an accurate finished end product. And then we just need to make 8 more of these and we can sew them all together for our February pillow. So as you can see, making the hearts is really easy and making it scrappy is a lot of fun too. And then I did not bind this one, although there is a binding option in the pattern, but I just thought it would be really cute without the binding on it. So I just did the hearts and then this cute gingham backing. This is a Lulla Boutique print that I had in my stash. I think it was from her Nest line or maybe Farmer's Daughter. I can't remember exactly, but I've just had this in my stash for a while. So I thought that would be really cute. And then I think I mentioned this last time, but these pillows do finish at 20 by 20. And if you want them to be extra puffy, I recommend getting a larger insert for them. So you can do a 20 by 20 insert, but if you can find a 22 by 22 insert, that's even better. And it'll just squeeze in there and fill out all those corners really well and just make your pillow super nice and fluffy. So here is our heart pillow for this year. I think it turned out really cute. Let's take a look at the stitchy version. Here's my finished stitchy piece, and this is actually before I finished it off. I'm debating between this fabric and this fabric for the backing. I think both are super sweet. These are prints from a line called Sophie by Brenda Riddle for Moda, and they are just both soft, cute prints. I'm actually kind of leaning towards this white one because I think that would be really cute. And by the way, if you're into minis, you can actually bind these little cross stitch pillows just like you would a normal pillow. But instead of doing a 2.5 inch binding, because this is such a small project, I recommend doing a 1.5 inch binding. And I'll put a link right here on a video where I did this kind of different style binding on a smaller project. You do it just slightly different, but it's really fun and it allows you to put a nice little binding on the edge of a really tiny project. So head over and check that out if you're interested in doing that. I'm not going to show you how to do that in today's video. Now, one thing you might notice about this one is that the border on it is slightly different than the border from last month's. If you're going to be doing the whole cloth version, follow the whole cloth border pattern that comes with the patterns. The monthly patterns have individual pillow finishing and then whole cloth finishing instructions in them, and that whole cloth border is just slightly different so that you have one outer border that's the same and consistent, and then you can just add the little stitchy pieces by month as you get them. But I thought for the pillows, I think I wanted to just do something a little different for all of the borders. So this border, instead of having the snowflakes like last month, we have little hearts on our corners. I did stitch this again on Witcheled Beautiful Beige 14 count Aida, and I did use all DMC floss as well. All that information, of course, is in the pattern. I'm going to do this one a little different, so I thought I would show it on video. So I took 4 pieces of fabric that I liked the color of, some batting, and then some background fabric, and I'm going to do kind of a little patchworky outside for this cross stitch piece. So first thing I'm going to do is just lay out some of my pieces, and you'll notice that they're not the same size and they're not even the same width. I'm just using some scraps from my stash that I thought looked good together, and I'm just going to lay them out how I think they will go nicely. And doing it this way, you can make your pillow any size that you like. I'm still going to stick with something a little bit smaller, probably about 5 inches by 5 inches. So my strips just need to be big enough to get me to that point. Once I have some strips I like, the next thing I'm going to do is mark up my cross stitch piece. So I'm taking my ruler and I'm just going to make lines that are a 1/2 inch away from my outside border edge. So as you can see, I'm just lining it up right there with my outside stitches and just marking a 1/2 inch away. And by the way, you can also trim this. For some reason, I decided to just draw the lines. And I'm going to use these lines as a guide to sew on my fabric strips. So for my first strip, I'm just going to line it up along my first line and the side edge of my piece. And I'm just going to sew using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to then just press that back, and I'm just using my seam roller. You can press it with an iron. Just try and keep your iron off of your stitches. The next thing I'm going to do is just trim off any excess fabric. So now I have a straight line to work with again, and I'm going to again lay that fabric right up next to that drawn line and sew down that edge again using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to add all 4 of my pieces this same way. So again, I'm just going to seam roller and then trim off the excess. And now that I have all my fabric added, I just need to trim it up, and you can make yours any size that you like. I think I'm going to go for about 5 by 5, something like that. That sounds good to me. And so I'm just trimming off my excess fabric and again just lining that up so that I get a 5 by 5 square. And that's why it didn't matter what size my little strips were. They just needed to be wide enough. The next thing I'm going to do is take some batting. And I have all of my leftover scraps from bag making or quilt making, and I keep those for small projects like these. And I'm going to cut out a piece that again is 5 by 5. Because I want to keep some of that batting bulk out of our seam when we sew this to our backing, I'm trimming off about a 1/4 inch or so around that edge. And then as you can see here, we've got a little bit of fabric sticking out along that edge. That'll help keep our seam from being too bulky when we stitch it to our backing. Next, I'm going to cut out a backing piece, again, just making it the same size, and you can make this any size you like. I'm again going with about a 5 inch by 5 inch square. Now we're going to place our backing right side up, our stitch piece right side down with the batting on top. We're going to sew around all 4 sides, leaving a little opening at the bottom to turn. And now my piece is sewn all the way around the edges. I like to press back where that opening is a 1/4 inch. That's going to help once we get our pillow turned right side out. That'll help give me a line to follow when I'm stitching my pillow closed. And you're just going to want to be careful here and just poke out those corners very carefully. Once I have it turned right side out, I also like to use a hair marker to poke out those corners a little bit. And then I'll hit it with my seam roller one more time just to straighten out that open edge. Now for this one, I'm going to be stuffing it with crushed walnut shells. This is great if you want to use these as a pin cushion. It also makes it a little bit heavier as well. I'll link the ones that I got below. They have a little bit of a scent to them, but you can also get them for pretty inexpensive at your local pet store. I think they put them in lizard cages or something. Next, I'm going to use a funnel to help pour my walnut seeds in. And once it got a little more full, I had my daughter come in and help me hold it. So she's holding the pillow up so that I can get those seeds in without them going everywhere. And then this step is optional, but I do like to shove a little bit of pillow stuffing in that open end. And all that really does is help keep those seeds from falling out while I'm trying to stitch it shut. So I like to do that. You don't have to, it's totally optional. I'm going to hand sew my opening closed. You could also machine stitch it. I'm just using a ladder stitch just like I did for our January cross stitch pillow. If you've never done this stitch, head back over to my January cross stitch pillow finishing. I show how to do it in detail and slow it down and walk you through it step by step. And that's it. I think it turned out really cute. One last note on these, if you're going to be using them as a pin cushion, I do like to put my pins in the back side, and that way you're not messing up your beautiful cross stitching. So that is going to be it for this month's February Quilty and Stitchy Pillow of the Month pattern release. I hope you enjoyed these. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments below. You can get both patterns right now in my store at store.confessionsofahomeschooler.com. And if you just search February Pillow, all of the patterns should pull up for you. And then, like I mentioned last time, I will be bundling all of the Pillow of the Month patterns together once we have them all released, and I will be releasing them in a printable version bundle, so you can get it in either PDF or print. Right now, the individual patterns are just available in PDF. And I usually do give a little bit of a discount on that full bundle at the end of the year as well. So I just wanted to let you guys know if you want to be patient and wait for that whole bundle. So that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed the February Pillow of the Month. Thanks so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next month for our March Pillow of the Month.